How to draft a contract without using a lawyer. Stick around and I'll tell you. Hi everyone, Simon here from the Contract Company. Contracts, that's what we do all day, every day, and sometimes overnight. Lucky us. Righto, so you want to draft a contract and you don't want to use someone like me. Don't worry, I'm not offended. That's life. I'm going to tell you how to do that, right? So this is what you need to do. The first thing you need to do is you need to search online and find a good, reputable website that sells the template that you're after. Now, make sure that you do a search for your jurisdiction. So, assuming you're based in Australia, you want to be searching Google in Australia for the relevant template for the type of contract that you want. So let's say you want to provide services to someone, you want to find a services agreement, or let's say you want to, you're a contractor, you want an independent contractor agreement. So the key is you've got to find a good template, and when I say a good template, a template that's from a reputable source, hopefully drafted by Australian lawyers if you're in Australia, or the lawyers of the jurisdiction wherever you're from. And then the second thing is you need to find a template that is the right template for you. Because often, using service agreements as an example, there's two versions of a service agreement, or there should be, depending on the website that sells them. There'll be a service agreement that's pro the supplier of the services, and there'll be another services agreement that's pro the recipient or provider of the services. Did I say that right? Supplier of the services and the recipient of the services. Basically, two sides of the same transaction. If you're providing the services or receiving the services, you can have contracts that are different in terms of their drafting bias. So this one will favour obviously this bloke, and this one will favour this guy. So where do you find these templates? If you're in Australia, you can go to a website called RP Emery. They do some good ones. I think there's another website called Precedence Online. I've seen another one called Net Lawman. I think they're Indian templates. I've only had cause to review one of theirs once and it was okay. I think basically if you just look around on the internet, you will find them as long as you can search, or you have enough information to work out exactly what template you're looking for. So if you don't know what template you're looking for, put the time in to try and do some research into Google to find out what that template is, because once you then actually select the template, you'll be so much further down. Once you select the right template, you'll be so much further down the track than if you start off and use the wrong one. So that's the first thing. Find the right template and get it from a reputable source, and hopefully the website where you buy them from or buy it from will basically say, it's been drafted by an Australian lawyer or a lawyer of the relevant jurisdiction. Righto, so once you've got it and you've bought it, what do? Well, you need to follow the instructions carefully. Hopefully they give you when you fill it out. So you need to make sure the parties' details are correct. And the biggest issue here is you need to make sure that the contract is with a legal entity. Now, a legal entity in Australia is either a person or a company. There are some other random ones. I'm not going to worry about them because person or a company covers 99.9% of everything. So make sure that either you or the other person on the other side, you're defining them correctly as either an individual or as a company. Now, if they have a family trust or some sort of trust, the only legal entity there is the trustee of the trust. So the trustee of the trust, i.e. the person who administers the trust, will either be an individual or a company. So is that clear? The parties' details, they must be an individual or a company. Then the next thing is you need their ABN, so the Australian business number. If the individual's registered for GST, they should have an ABN, and you can go to abnlookup.gov.au, I think it is, or just type in ABN lookup into Google and you'll find it. Put in that person's ABN. If that person is not registered for GST and they don't have an ABN, don't put it in. If they're a company, the company will have an ACN or an ABN. When I say or, most companies are registered for GST, so they have an ABN. I think it's best to put in the company number because that is the primary identifier of the company. You can go to asic.gov.au and do a company search, and that way you'll be able to find the company's ACN or Australian company number. So you'll have the company name, Pty Ltd or Ltd if it's a public company, and you'll find out the correct descriptor of the company from the ASIC search. So if it's, I don't know, Jim's carpet washing company Pty Ltd. The Pty Ltd part, you need to make sure you get those bits right, and they'll be found on the ASIC website. So that will tell you the correct ending, whether it's proprietary limited or just a public company being limited. Then you put in the ACN, you're good to go. I'm not so fast as to whether you have the address in there. The reason I'm not so fast is because addresses are usually important for notice, as in if you want to give notice from one party to the other party under the contract, then usually you need that formal address listed in the contract. But most contracts, or at least the ones we draft, allow for notice to occur via email. So I actually don't care personally if you have the correct address details or not. The next thing you need to do, and this is where things will get complicated, and I'm going to have to generalize because there's that many different types of contracts, but you need to make sure that whatever's being provided under the contract or received, depending on which side of the fence you sit, there is a clear description of what that is. There's two things there, or three things there. One, set out exactly what's occurring. Like if you're providing services, set out exactly what the services are. If there is some doubt as to whether a clause or a sentence can be interpreted a couple of ways, then put in another sentence that says, for the avoidance of doubt, that means X, Y, and Z. So you just go into more detail specifying the potential issue. So you might say, Jim will provide green apples. To avoid doubt, green apples means Granny Smith's. That's a silly example, but you do really need to be careful, as in clearly define the services, because that's often where disputes arise, because people don't know what exactly they'd signed up to provide or to receive. Right, so you've got the services. What else have we got there? Then you've got the pricing, so make sure the price is clear. There should be some standard terms and clauses in the contract that deal with the actual payment mechanisms, in terms of you need an invoice. Once an invoice is received, and the other party will pay on X days. You can change those sorts of time frames, but make sure you specify what the amount is and when it's payable. And hopefully there's no doubt or dispute as to what those amounts are and when they're payable. Services, price. As I said, it's tough to try and do this because there's that many different types of contracts that what I'm saying now will probably not be relevant for 50% of you who are looking to put in place like a website development agreement or a mobile app agreement. Then the last thing you want is the signature block. Make sure that once you've got those entities that you've defined at the start of the document, the individual and the company names, they need to be replicated down at the end of the agreement. And make sure you do those correctly. If you're doing a deed of something, deed of release, a deed of settlement, you need to be very careful with the execution clause. Go and do some research on Google about those, because if you get the execution clause wrong on a deed, that can invariably make the whole deed void. So that's one area with deeds you need to be very careful. So make sure you just do some research on that. But look, if you've got a good template, if it's drafted correctly in terms of the right bias. So what I mean by that is, I'll slow down a bit. You go and find the template that you need on hopefully on the internet. You find a website that sells it, rpemory.com.au, online precedents, I think Net Lawman. There's a lot of them out there. So go and do a search. Find the precedent. Make sure it's got the right drafting bias, whether you're the provider of the services or the recipient of the services or whatever it is, the builder or the client. Then make sure you fill it out correctly with the correct details, legal entity details, the correct services, the pricing, when the price is payable, make sure it's signed properly. If you do all of that, you're going to go a long way to having a contract that is at least pretty good. Whether it's perfect, probably not, but it's going to be pretty good, and it's going to cover probably 90% of people out there. So that's one way you can put in place a contract without having to deal with someone like me, even though I don't know why you wouldn't want to talk to me. But anyway, I hope that helps. As I say, I've tried to give as much information as I can. It's just very difficult when there's such a broad range of contracts out there. Any questions? Simon@contractcompany.com.au or 1-800-355-455. Thanks very much.